All right, hello, welcome to Armchair Sports Talk, and we're here with our co-host David, also known as at Hamburgini, and we're gonna get right into this Thanksgiving slate. But first, I always start off with a how are you? How are you doing, David?
I'm doing good, Sterling. No complaints. Getting ready for Thanksgiving, and no better way to get ready for Thanksgiving but to break down a Thanksgiving Thursday football slate. And it's good to be coming, via armchair this week. A little different breakup. Anzo is, already getting ready for Thanksgiving out of town with the family, so we're going this route this week, and we'll send it over to him, and then he'll post it up onto the DFS Tavern for us afterwards.
Awesome. Yep, that sounds good. Hopefully, he's having a good time with family, and then maybe able to make a little bit of money on the side there as well is always great. So we're gonna get right into it. Yeah, I didn't do a proper intro with DFS Tavern. I don't know. Did you say DFS Tavern? I was turning up the volume, getting everything right.
Yeah, I mentioned Anzo at the DFS Tavern. He'll probably, you'll post it up on Armchair, and then we'll send him the link, and he'll probably, share that link onto the YouTube channel, the DFS Tavern.
Absolutely. So be sure to check this out on Wednesday morning. More than likely is when you'll be able to see it. So you'll get at least a full 24 hours of reviews and conversation to set your lineups for some Thanksgiving football. So without further ado, we're already looking at the screen here for the quarterbacks. There's only 3 games, so that's 6 teams for us to consider. Both David and I are going to choose one quarterback that we like, and then we're going to give some reasoning behind that. So with me getting the host this time, I'm going to go ahead and let David give us our first quarterback here.
Yeah, I'm looking over things, and I've kind of already made up my lineups this week, and I have multiple lineups, but the guy that I'm looking at the most is probably the safest option at quarterback this week, even though he let us down just a few weeks ago. And the majority of my lineups are getting started with Drew Brees. I really think that a couple weeks ago was a bit of an outlier, and I see some revenge coming this coming Thursday night in Atlanta. I see him seeking some revenge, and even though it's $6,800 on DraftKings, we always mention that 3x value. We want basically almost 21 points out of him. I do think that he's going to come very close to that or even exceed that in a little revenge on Thursday night, Thanksgiving night game.
No, I think that's a great call. I mean, there's Matthew Berry says start your studs on ESPN. I think this is a great example of that. This is a get even game for the Saints. For whatever reason, the Falcons woke up randomly and gave it to them 2 weeks ago. So the Falcons are probably in trouble here, and it can happen one of a couple ways. So we'll look for that to come to fruition. So because you chose the guy that I would have most likely went to, and full disclosure, I haven't had a chance to do a lot of research, so I'm probably going to watch this video myself and just analyze my thought process to make sure that I'm as thoughtful as I can be. But Jeff Driscoll here is questionable, and no doubt he has a tough matchup against the Bears. But if he's going to be playing from behind, he has the better skill position players in Galladay and Marvin Jones Jr. Hopefully Hawkinson's a little healthier. But what we want to focus on are these rushing yards over here off to the side. Let's go to his game log here, because last game he had 63 rushing yards. Before that, 51. He's actually getting more rushing yards as the games progress. And he played Chicago already at Chicago, so now he gets to come home. 19 fantasy points on the road. If he can top 20 fantasy points at 5,500, he might be able to give us a little bit of savings. So I think Jeff Driscoll gets us a little bit more flexibility as we go on. So what do you think about Jeff Driscoll and Drew Brees?
Yeah, I mean, I currently have Driscoll tagged. I'm waiting to see what happens with the questionable tag on him because obviously, like you mentioned, he does have that running upside, which is always a positive in a quarterback spot. And based off of what you've seen in the 3 games he's been starting since Stafford has been out, he definitely shows a good floor running the football. I would say 4 to 5 points running the football right there. And, you're already a third of the way there based off of the $5,500, price tag he's warranting. As soon as I see that questionable tag out, I might, tweak some of my lineups. And I'm just curious that if he's unable to go and Stafford being doubtful, I mean, who would the quarterback position fall on then with Detroit if both of these guys are out? I haven't even looked at who the third string quarterback would be.
Yeah, his name is David Blow. That's a rough name for a quarterback to go out there with very little prep against the Bears defense. So hopefully it doesn't come down to that. But so now you know the name. But yeah, no need to get too crazy at quarterback. So we're going to move over to running back. And this is a position where we want to start to try to find some value. But first off, we got to know who do we want to play. So with your pay up option, why don't you keep it going and you tell me who you like up here?
Yeah, I mean, for a pay up option, you know, even though they've been much better against the run this season, I can't argue the fact of the amount of targets Alvin Kamara has seen, I think, over the last like 4 weeks. I think it's like 35 targets or 37 targets over the last 4 weeks. Obviously, the wide receiver number 2 in this Saints on the Saints team, even though he's from a running back position, he is the wide receiver 2, if you want to look at it that way. And the price tag is up there. Obviously, again, we're going to be looking at him getting 24 points. And even in a game where they got literally blown off the field in New Orleans, he still had a decent game that game. So, you know, I'm looking at him seeing, you know, upwards of 9-10 targets again on Thanksgiving, and hopefully he comes up, you know, with at least 7 catches. So there's 7 points right there on DraftKings full PPR, not counting the yards, you know. So even if he has like 70 yards receiving, 7 catches, there's 14 points right there. Hopefully he can get his butt into the end zone, so that would, you know, give you 20 and whatever rushing yards he gives you. So I do think he has a very safe floor. And that's the way I'm kind of looking at some of my lineups right now, especially when I have lineups with Breeze as quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's hard to get off of Kamara. And, you know, like, why go away from somebody who's, again, look at this, 9 targets, 10 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets, and he's catching them at right around a 90% catch rate. So, I mean, he has a built-in floor of 8 points plus yards. I think I'm just repeating you, actually, now that I think about it. So you make several good points there with Kamara. I think he's a very logical pay-up option, cash game play if you're doing cash games on Thanksgiving. So, you know, in choosing someone different, I mean, it's going to be cliche, right? We're looking at the top 2 picks. So I'll play devil's advocate for a moment here, and I'll just say that Latavius Murray, I don't know why he was getting as much work early on, because the game wasn't out of hand. The Saints were just playing with maybe a 1 touchdown lead, maybe a 10-point lead, and then he broke a pretty big run for a touchdown. So, you know, he's only getting 7 rushing attempts. He's not used in the passing game, but I just wanted to bring him up as the way to get some leverage on Kamara, because if you're not going to play Kamara and you're going to miss out on his points, then you have to say, like, okay, if it's not Kamara, it's somebody. So Latavius Murray could very easily be that somebody. But I'm going to go ahead and take the other obvious play up here at Ezekiel Elliott. He got 2 touchdowns 2 weeks ago against the Lions. I don't want to look too much into the game with the Patriots. He's still getting all the usage, right? 21 rushing attempts. He's even sprinkling in a few targets. I think this Buffalo team has proven they can be run on the interior. And this is just a great opportunity for the Cowboys to exert their dominance and beat up on bad teams. And I don't think the Bills are a bad team, but they take advantage of what other teams do badly. And anytime they get a chance to feed Zeke, they're going to want to do that. So my pay-up option would be Zeke Elliott, save us about $700 there off of Kamara. And, you know, their stat line, their points per game is pretty similar. So I think that this is going to be a pretty popular thing for a lot of people to pay down at wide receiver, tight end, defense, wherever they have to pay up at running back, just because you don't want to forgo those points. I mean, it's a big jump there. They're both averaging right around 19 points per game, and then there's a 7-point drop off. So, you know, just something to be mindful of. And I'll let you go ahead and give us a lesser owned play, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, and you definitely are able to fit both Kamara and Zeke into lineups. I mean, I've done it, and obviously by doing that, you're going to have to find some pay down options at other positions, and they're there this week with pay down options. And you know, you can't argue the fact with Zeke. I'm going to say you should see probably, you know, his 25 touches this game, because the one thing Buffalo can do is defend the pass. But like you mentioned, they are susceptible to the run. So I definitely can see Dallas really feeding the ball to Zeke on Thanksgiving, and I see him exceeding value. His price has come down, from what it was. He was upwards of $9K. Now it's $7,400. I think is a really good steal to fit Zeke into your lineup, especially when you have someone getting the ball that many times. And like you mentioned, as a contrarian play, as a possible pivot, looking at Latavius Murray. Um, I was considering Latavius, and I would have possibly have put him in the lineup if he was several $100s less. And the reason why he's not getting, like you mentioned, he's not getting, the touches that you would want, especially from a guy at 5,600 when there's guys at less money who are getting more touches. The one positive thing is if the Saints do get the ball within that 5-yard line, we've seen that Kamara, they've kind of taken him out of the goal line situation because they want to make sure he remains healthy. So Murray is that guy, the goal line back, once they get like within the 5. So if they do there and he manages to get in the end zone, it's possible he could pay off value. But I was wishing he was like in the 4K range, maybe like 47. And I would have maybe have stuck him into a lineup, but at 56, I'm probably not going to go there. For me as a pay down option this week, I mean, obviously a few weeks ago, we saw these two teams play, Chicago and Detroit. And I think it was the week like everybody wanted David Montgomery, and it was the week that David Montgomery completely shat the bed for us. But the one guy who I thought was in the doghouse has now seemed to come back to life. And I'm looking more at Tariq Cohen over David Montgomery this week. Saves you, $400 on DraftKings. He is more expensive on FanDuel, $6,400 on FanDuel versus $5,900 on FanDuel for David Montgomery. And on FanDuel, where it's only a half-point PPR, maybe FanDuel, it might be a smart idea to go Montgomery because I'm sure he's still going to see the bulk of the carries. But as far as, from the passing situation on DraftKings, I'm definitely looking at Tariq Cohen. He's been getting a lot of targets. He's been catching the ball a lot, and he always has a upside of getting into the end zone. So I actually think he has a higher ceiling over David Montgomery, especially on DraftKings. So that's where I'm looking as my pay down running back if I have to go there.
Yeah, no, I like that play. I was just looking at his targets. That's what really catches my attention. I mean, $5,000, 6 targets and 9 targets the last 2 games. The games were somewhat competitive. I mean, they lost at the Rams, and then it was a back and forth game with the Giants. There's no reason to think this can't be back and forth. Yeah, I mean, he's almost on a 50-50 time split. So what I brought up while you were talking is just the snap count. And as we look on here, it says that Tariq got 55% of the snaps and Montgomery got 62% of the snaps. So there was a few overlaps there where they were on the field at the same time. So yeah, that's a good call, and I like getting some different looks there. It's tough, man. I mean, there's not many players to choose from, so you can be as creative as you want, but if you choose someone who's not going to be on the field, you're going to be pretty frustrated. But Frank Gore at 3,900 offers us some salary relief. It's just like, I don't know if many people are going to do that. This guy just became 3rd all-time on the all-time rushing list, passing Barry Sanders, so good for him. This guy does it week in and week out. And I know Singletary is getting a lot of touches, but 15 rushing attempts against Denver, 11. Yeah, it was down against Cleveland with 5. But and he sprinkles in a target or 2. So at 3,900, all we need is him to fall in the end zone, which he hasn't done in a while now. That's 4 games, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. And I was listening to a podcast on my way home to do tonight's show, and they just reminded us last year of LeGarrette Blount, I think it was, who was in a rough matchup and ended up getting 100-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, I'm not saying that Frank Gore can do that, but, I mean, I think that they could not feature Frank Gore, but really play him up. And if he finds himself on the 1 or 2 yard line, I think they let him plow it into the end zone. And that's all you need at 3,900.
Exactly. And I was looking at Frank Gore as well in some of my builds because of that nice price that he's coming in at $3,900. And again, this is probably the toughest game on the Thanksgiving slate when you look at Buffalo and Dallas. Both defenses overall are really good. They're very good against the pass, both of these defenses, but both of these defenses are susceptible to the run. And at $3,900, I can see Frank Gore getting there. And obviously, I'm going to say that Buffalo is going to try and run the ball as much as they can, considering how good the Cowboys are versus the pass, and vice versa. Buffalo also very good against the pass. I'm going to suspect that Dallas is going to be running the ball a lot. Some play action passes that come in there to hopefully draw the defense in, and maybe they can find a receiver open. But for me, this game, if I'm going to go there, I'm targeting the running backs over anything else. And for $3,900, I'll definitely, maybe look at putting Frank Gore in there. Obviously, there's some injury tags that we have to pay attention to, and based on what that happens, then maybe some of these lineups will get adjusted for me. And like you mentioned, Frank Gore, becoming the third all-time leading rusher. I mean, how many people, when you say Frank Gore, do you see Canton, Ohio, for a Hall of Fame guy? But he has solidified himself to getting the gold jacket.
Oh, 100%. There's something to be said about doing it for such a lengthy period of time in today's NFL, especially because you just don't have these guys doing that anymore. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I guess Adrian Peterson's kind of like that generational player that crossed over, but unfortunately he lost that season due to disciplinary action, and then that cost him a pretty good chunk of productivity. So shout out to Frank Gore for his consistency. I did click on Devontae Freeman real quick. He was a full participant in practice. We skimmed over him. The Falcons, without him, they were doing a lot of a rotation basis. And I think, so who's to say? I don't know if they're going to go lean heavily on Devontae Freeman. I think they know what they have in him. It's hard to figure them out. Like, are they playing for something? Are they not? So I just had to mention that he lost his questionable tag in practice in full today. So moving over to wide receiver. I'll let you go ahead and have the easy pay up option here at wide receiver if you want. And if you don't take it, I'll take it. So I'll let you guys kick this off.
Yeah, obviously, everyone is going to, I think, fit Michael Thomas into their lineups, and for all clear purposes. We mentioned it last week on the pod. He is the best wide receiver in the game right now, and it seems like it doesn't matter how many people guard him, he still finds a way to catch the ball. And he's going to be a guy that's going to see 9 to 12 targets a game, and he seems to come down with 8 to 11 receptions a game. So you can definitely get there, and you can fit him in. And it's honestly, you can fit, if you really wanted to, you could fit Kamara, Zeke, and Michael Thomas into your builds this week and still have what I think is a pretty good lineup.
Yeah, I mean, you said it all. It's pretty straightforward. Michael Thomas, I think that it makes your lineup possibly a little thin in certain positions if you do all three of them. But you're right, you can do that and come out in a pretty good spot. So I would pretty much choose between Thomas and Kamara in most of my lines, but because I'm still doing 20 on Thursday, I will have a little bit of overlap there between those two guys. I didn't click on Michael Thomas because it's all known. He's amazing. I'm clicking on Julio just because I know, okay, he didn't participate in Tuesday's practice. So I don't know. Just a quick question, side note, what do you think about Julio Jones? Do you think he's going to play on Thursday?
That's the big question right now. And obviously, I'm waiting to see if that questionable tag comes off. Like you mentioned, what are the Falcons really playing for? They are not going to make the playoffs no matter what they do. So at this point, it's kind of like, why risk it? Let him get healthy. And at this point, if he wants to get healthy the last few weeks and maybe play, week 16, week 17, maybe by then he gets healthy and he's ready to go, maybe the last game of the season, then cool. Otherwise, I don't see any objections to even sitting out the remainder of the season because they have nothing to play for. So as of right now, I don't have any Julio Jones in my lineups. The other questionable tag on the other side of the field, even though we don't have individual defensive players, Marshawn Lattimore is still up in the air on whether or not he plays on Thursday. If Lattimore plays and Julio plays, I'm not saying Julio can't still come down with receptions against Lattimore, but it's definitely going to make things a lot harder. So if Lattimore plays, then I definitely will probably not have any Julio Jones at that price tag.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's very logical what we're saying. So it looks like Julio's going to be a fade for us most likely, whether he plays or not. Because if he plays, I think he is hampered, and I don't know what's going on if he plays. So I have on my screen here Allen Robinson. So they just played Detroit, so I'm looking back at that. It was a 2013 game. I can't remember who won. I guess that would be the Lions won, right?
No, the Bears won
Oh,
that game. That
okay.
was the game that Trubisky actually had a decent game.
Okay, yeah. So I see here he got 9 targets. He caught 6 of them. He got 86 yards. He didn't get in the end zone, and he's also coming off a 131-yard game. So if we're talking about a pay-up option, we know what Allen Robinson can do. He's an immense talent, and one of the funnier NFL memes I saw was said, "Please keep Allen Robinson in your thoughts and prayers. He's not hurt. He just had to play with Blake Bortles and Mitchell Trubisky for his whole career." So funny little chuckle there. But with that immense talent, he's already gone up against Slay, who's sometimes been a cornerback you want to avoid, other times not. I'd say this year he's pretty much not. Like, there's no worries here. We know Allen Robinson's the clear number one. We don't have to wait on injury news. All three of these games are in a dome, which is nice, so you don't have to worry about weather. You know, you got to find a way to get your good players the ball, and Allen Robinson's the Bears' best player on offense. So that would be my pay-up option. I think if you can get Robinson and Thomas in your lineups, you're gonna be looking pretty strong at wide receiver, and then go cheap elsewhere on one other one. So I'll use that as my transition. You got any money savers at wide receiver?
Yeah, and I definitely think Robinson is in play. It's like looking at this on the DFS side of it. It's like the DFS side is saying play Bears, play the Bears, but from a reality standpoint, and even though they're not great, but for some reason, when you talk Thanksgiving, all of a sudden this team turns a switch on, and the Lions always seem to really step up their play on Thanksgiving Day. In games where, there's certain games over the years where the other team's been favored, and you go, oh yeah, on paper this team should blow the Lions out, but on Thanksgiving, all of a sudden things change, and the Lions step up their play, and they've actually come up with some huge upsets over the years on Thanksgiving. I don't know if that's going to happen again, but I can definitely see the Lions stepping up some play on Thanksgiving Day, and I think this is going to be a pretty close game. And I don't have any issues going to Robinson. When I was looking at the pricing amongst the sites, I definitely think he's more of an option on Draftkings. FanDuel, obviously FanDuel, you have a higher salary cap, but also the price tags usually jump up. And I think he's $7,700 on FanDuel. I found it a little hard to get to him in the lineups I was constructing on FanDuel, at least from my first look lineups that I've built. Again, I might possibly make some adjustments and try and fit him in on FanDuel, but definitely a little hard on FanDuel. For me, as a pay down option, both sites is also coming from this Bears-Lions game, especially with Taylor Gabriel's questionable tag. He's in concussion protocol, and he might not clear concussion protocol by the time the game rolls around. And Anthony Miller has been seeing an increased target share the last couple games. And I think on both sites, he's a really good price. And if Gabriel's out, it even enhances his play even more. So that's where I'm really looking at as a pay down option this week, is Anthony Miller on both DraftKings and FanDuel.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. That would be my lean as well. But because we want to give everyone out there as many options as possible, I'm going to choose someone else. But just to say a few good things about Anthony Miller, 9 targets last week, and that is the game where Gabriel got knocked out. So he's obviously going to see an enhanced role. So there's no reason why you couldn't play Miller and Robinson. I know that's a little thin at the Bears wide receiver position to go with both of those guys, but again, you got some nice tournaments on Thanksgiving. I think the $3 wishbone is the 20 entry max. You can keep your investment at a minimum with some nice upside there. So I do like that. I want to dive in on the snap count over here on the Bears because I do think there's some opportunity here. You got Allen Robinson at 91% of the snaps, but then you got a couple guys. So Gabriel was at 55%, and then once he went out, you got Javon Wims. So I do think that he's in play. So if Gabriel is out, Javon Wims, preseason darling, and I think he even got some opportunity. He's the bare minimum at $3,000. So let me go here. He only got 2 targets against the Rams, and that might have been kind of a blowout. Here we go against Minnesota. Yeah, because and Washington was the game where Gabriel had a great game, but he got knocked out, and then so he didn't play the next week. So when Javon Wims filled in for him, he got 5 targets. He got 4 of them, 56 yards. So I mean, at the Stone Men, like this might be the guy that we need to look at playing. He's a bigger wide receiver from what I remember. And I think the Bears are gonna you need to be unique and original. So he'll probably get a good amount of ownership, and rightfully so. Maybe even if Gabriel does play, they might want to see what they have in wins. And not a bad option. You know, if you're gonna do 20 lines, maybe 10% makes them in 2 of your lines.
Yeah, and that's the other area that I was looking this week, especially if you want to save a good amount of salary, was Wims. And I would only go there if Gabriel is out. I mean, if Gabriel does clear concussion protocol and plays, obviously that's going to really limit the amount of snaps Wims sees on the field. I mean, he'll still see some snaps on the field if Gabriel plays. But with Gabriel, if Gabriel is out, like you mentioned that week when he was out and he saw a good amount of targets for in the amount of money he is against Minnesota, then definitely I would look there at saving a good amount of money. I mean, not that Miller's that expensive. I think he was $3,900 this
Right.
week on DraftKings. So I mean, if you wanted to save an extra $900 if Gabriel's out and go to Wims, that extra $900 might get you to that next tier where if you can't, maybe the lineup that you're building, you really want to try and get Kamara and Zeke in there and maybe somebody else, maybe that extra $900 allows you to get there. But I'm only going to go there if Gabriel's out this week. Right now, I have Anthony Miller as of this moment 100% in all my lineups right now.
Nice. No, I like that. Good. I mean, that's also another thing that we got to acknowledge is you got to commit. There are going to be some rough times out there. I mean, this past weekend I had some great hits. I was on Derrick Henry. I was on Christian McCaffrey. I mixed it up at tight end, so I had a couple of lineups that were live. But Alvin Kamara really sunk me in a lot of them. But the thing is you do have to commit because if Kamara did hit, and I know he was chalky, you would have had to have him on your team. So you can't be half right and half wrong in this. I think that you just get too much overexposure. So even in 20 lines, you got to have a few guys that you're committed on. So I like that Anthony Miller is in all the lineups that were made if you only did 20. So one other thing I wanted to bring up, I organized this by price and then I organized it by fantasy points per game. I know the matchup's bad. I know he had a bad week last week, but it has to be said. Amari Cooper at $6,000 is really inexpensive, and that's a tough matchup. But Amari Cooper's a really good wide receiver. Yes, he's up and down, but man, his ups again. Last Thanksgiving, he had 3 touchdowns. I think it was against the Eagles, if I remember correctly. And if it wasn't against the Eagles, it was against some other team, maybe the Redskins. But he did have some dominating performances, not just on Thanksgiving, but in primetime games. And he does tend to have better home splits than he does on the road. So with them playing at home against Buffalo, I think that he has a few things working in his favor. He definitely didn't exert too much energy last week against New England.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that when you really look at the slate, if people are like going over it, he's probably going to be very low owned this week compared to other wide receivers on this little 3-game slate, because I have a feeling that most people are kind of under the same thought process I am, where you're talking about 2 solid defenses against the pass, and you have other games that open up better options at wide receiver, at least on paper, and at least when you look at the DVP that you're looking at, or the DVOA. based on these charts. So if you're basing it off of DVOA, most people are probably going to stay away from Cooper. So to be contrarian in some builds, again, if you're going to build a bunch of lineups, just to be contrarian and go away from that and throw Cooper into a lineup, it could be something that definitely sets you apart and could be a possible way to, making you a lot of money this week. Because I have a feeling he's going to be, very, very low owned.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards a 4 wide receiver or a double tight end in about 50% of my lineups, just to force myself to be unique, because I'm going to want to be drawn into doing Kamara and Elliott and then kind of go from there and see what I can afford. So to force myself, I'm going to start a wide receiver and build out from there, and that'll force me to get some different lineups and looks.
Definitely. And as of right now, I mean, I always try to get a running back into my flex spot, and the majority of my lineups do have running backs in the flex, but there are a couple that I actually have only 2 running backs, and I have wide receivers in the flex on this Thursday slate.
Yeah. All right, so let's go over to tight end, and I'll let you go and start off. Who's your favorite play at tight end? Let's only give one here because there's a lot of questionable tags, so we just got to monitor news, really. But who do you like the most?
Exactly. Again, Hooper has a questionable tag. I don't think he's practiced yet. And again, what do the Falcons really have to play for? So they might as well not even take the chance and put Austin Hooper on the field this week. Just make sure he gets back to 100% health. So for me, I mean, it's kind of a clear option, especially over the last 4 weeks. It seems like he's been starting to really step up, and he is the tight end the Saints were hoping they were going to get when they signed him. Because in the beginning of the season, he was definitely having a little difficulty, I think, working his way into this offense. But over the last few weeks, he's, I think, become very comfortable and is really adjusting. So for me, the pay-up option this week at tight end is Jared Cook.
Yeah, and who would have thought we'd be saying Jared Cook and consistency, but he's definitely turned it around here recently, and he's been pretty consistent. The notes here, of course, talk about 70-plus receiving yards or a touchdown in 5 consecutive games. That really can't be ignored. He has Drew Brees throwing to him, so you got yourself a nice stack there. And at $4,800 on this slate, he is not overpriced. He definitely justifies that price point. I'm just going to check on the status of Hockenson because he played some last week, if I'm not mistaken, has maintained activity through 2 injury reports this week. Okay, so it looks like he's a good chance of playing. So I do kind of like Hockenson. He's going to be near the line of scrimmage. He hasn't caught a touchdown in a while, but to start the season, he was targeted heavily in the end zone. And I'm just because, again, I'm full disclosure, I'm catching up on a lot of the injury status today. Jason Witten and Jarwin kind of eat away at each other's opportunity, and Jarwin kind of just he looks better out there when he catches the ball. Just a quick aside on that. What do you think about Witten and Jarwin as far as who looks better and who would be a better play between those two?
Well, I mean, obviously Jarwin, the younger of the two, more athletic of the two because he's younger. So I think Jarwin has a bigger upside than Witten. Obviously, Witten is kind of that safety valve, check down guy, possession kind of tight end when you want to try and move the chains. So a safer floor, I think, is Witten. A higher ceiling is Jarwin. But like you said, the two of them kind of take away from one another because, it seems like Dak wants to try and target both of them. So when you have teams that have multiple tight ends on the field, it kind of negates both, So, and not to mention, when you talk the Buffalo Bills are like one of the top defenses in the league at defending tight ends this season. So for me, it was just like an easy X or an easy line right through both of them this week for me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm looking at the Bears again because again they're just battling injuries. They're trying to figure out a lot of stuff. They the team is pretty close to in shambles, if I'm going to be honest. But Jesper Horsted was promoted from the practice squad, and their other tight ends did not practice on Tuesday. They're both questionable. So at least Jesper Horsted has an update here. And this might be worth a dart throw in one of the lineups at the bare minute, 2,500. I guess they have. They've been. I don't know what the Bears are doing. I'm looking for a little bit of a value play down here at tight end, and as I say it out loud, it's just not coming together with these guys. Um, Yeah, I'm going back up, and my one play at tight end, if I want to save any money, would just be Dawson Knox. I mean, he's on the field a fair enough. That would be my guy, and I'm just trying to get off of the Jared Cook. He's getting between 3 and 4 targets on average, I'd say, per game. He's beat out Tyler Croft for the starting position. He's got not a bad matchup, and at $2,900, he's cheaper than the cheapest wide receiver.
Yeah, that was where I went at tight end in my other builds was Dawson Knox this week. Cowboys ranked near the bottom in defending tight ends. So I mean, I would think that if the Bills have any success passing the football this week, it might come in the middle of the field and possibly targeting Dawson Knox this week. So in lineups where you want to try and stack Zeke and Kamara into your builds and also try and get Michael Thomas into your lineup, it's going to be very hard to also get Jared Cook in there. So those are the lineups that you put Dawson Knox in.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So tight end's kind of ugly. I won't be having too many tight ends rotating in that spot over there. But I think we named them all. All of the tight ends that were named in that conversation, I will have Jared Cook, Hawkinson, Witten, Jarwin, Dawson Knox. And that's pretty much it. If a different tight end wins that 20 entry, the one of those 20 entries, then I'll be significantly surprised. But on defense, who's your favorite defense here?
I'm going to the Bears as my defense in most of my lineups this week.
Yeah, I mean it's hard not to at $2,500, playing already a backup quarterback who's questionable. I think that's a really sharp play. Um, on the other side, the only thing I might do to be a little unique is to play the Lions defense going up against the Bears. They've had some struggles for sure, and let's see what they did last time they played. I'll look at both sides of the ball. So the last time they played at Chicago, they got 6 fantasy points, and then the Bears at home against the Lions got 8 fantasy points. So we just need something to happen. There's not too much to say about defenses this week. 3,500 for the Saints. They are the best play. The Falcons have a lot of injuries, and they've been up and down. I think those ups were the anomaly, and I think the downs are more of the normal. So if you have the money there, that's a good play. My honest preference would be to find the cheapest, like the least owned defense. So if you're able to figure that out just based off of your research, play them and hope that they go off, because that can be a really big differentiator, because we went through these positions and there's not a lot of ways to be different. But at defense with these 6 teams, if you like the Bills down here at 2,200, like just take the savings, hope they get a scoop and score or a punt return touchdown or something that's really hard to predict. And then you're better off for it because you got that $1,300 in savings to do with it what you want. So that was
Yeah.
all on the defense side. You got anything final thoughts to add on this Thanksgiving slate?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, I'm in agreement with you on that, on what you've been saying about the defense this week, is that it's not pretty this week when you talk defenses, but obviously, you got to look at the pricing again among sites, because on FanDuel, the Bears are costing you $5,000. They are the most expensive defense on FanDuel. So you get a significant price savings if you go to the Bears on DraftKings this week. So that's who I'm trying to fit into most of my lineups. And like you just mentioned, the Bills to me at 2,200 just seems too cheap. I mean, I know the Cowboys are at home, Thanksgiving. They still have a pretty potent offense, but the one thing the Bills can do is negate the pass, which if they're able to do that, and I mean Zeke, I'm sure is going to get his, but if they can take away the pass and maybe come up with a few sacks, I'm not expecting a lot of points from them. But at 2,200, if I can get 5 or 6, then that's definitely a positive this week. So I think those are the two that I'm really looking at this week. I think any defense, if you see any defense scoring this week, then that is a definite bonus, because as of right now, it's, you know, just playing everything out in my head, it's really hard for me to see any of these defenses coming up with a defensive score. Maybe a special teams, you know, punt return, kick return, maybe something like that might happen. But at least in my head right now, I'm not playing any scenarios out where these defenses score this week.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, so you said a lot there, and I don't need to say it again. So with Armchair Sports, this is Sterling. David and I got another video to do. We're going to break down the Sunday slate a little early. I don't know if I was supposed to give away the time frame, but I just did. So we're going to end this here. Dave, you want to tell them where they can find you?
Definitely, you know, Twitter, _Hamburghini, or you can always look for us on YouTube, DFS Tavern, where we put out quite a bit of content, golf, and also DFS football as well on DFS Tavern every single week. But this week we bring it to Armchair Sports. And all I can say is I hope everyone has a fantastic Thanksgiving on Thursday.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving. Check out this video on Armchair Sports Talk on YouTube and on Facebook. All right, guys. Bye.